I want to have a more lighthearted video on anything else. Like anything else. Like receipts, the retail kind, Ireland, something technology related, just anything else. But the past two videos on this channel were like things I really had to push out. And now I have a third one, and yeah, it's about elections and something that you've probably heard, a phrase that will be repeated over and over and over again for like the next 2 months. Maybe a bit more than that. You saw the title of this video, and yeah, it's voter fraud. And it's a serious issue. You know, a lot of people on the internet keep saying it's not real, it's not a thing. It is. We have documented cases of people trying to do that, and there may have been people who have actually gotten away with it. But some of you may be wondering, well, how many times has this really happened? How many times has this changed the outcome of a U.S. election? And in practice, none. And, you know, what about in theory? Also none. See, there is, what the mainstream media doesn't bring up is the way our elections are run make committing widespread voter fraud impossible, and the reason for that is because of a thing called the secret ballot, or the Australian ballot. That's the more formal term for it. But the secret ballot is literally a secret ballot. It's when you vote and your name is not attached to the ballot. And whether you're doing that in person or by mail, the part that gets counted does not have your name on it. And it's either really difficult or impossible to trace. Secret ballots have been around and have been the standard practice since about 1890. There were some holdouts long after that, but for simplicity's sake, 1890 is when election security became a serious thing. Because with secret ballots that don't have a name on them, when you show up to a polling location, you have to identify yourself in some way to prevent ballot stuffing. And every state does that. They have done that since everyone watching this video has been alive. Voter fraud is when someone tries to cast a second vote, you know, a subsequent vote and an eligible vote, that sort of thing. But the more of an impact that can have, you know, the more you yourself or even groups of people want to sway the election with in-person voter fraud or mail voter fraud, which there are 0 known cases of that, because the security in mail elections is much more difficult. Yes, your name is on the envelope, it's not on the ballot, but they do check that before it's counted. they check the information. The information on the envelope is the same you would give when you sign in person. Voter fraud happens, and there are Republicans and Democrats that have tried to do this, but it's never changed the outcome, and it never will. Claims to the contrary are false, objectively false. When I could show you a bunch of statistics, but I'm not going to do that because there are a lot of people who think statistics are a form of lying and the worst one. But it's difficult to do in any significant amount. There are hypothetical situations, but they are that, and it's difficult to do. It's really difficult. Even in Minnesota, which does not have a voter ID law, it's really difficult because in order to do that in person, you have to show up to 2 polling places and provide different names for different people. And the more polling places you try to do that, the more likely you are to get caught. And also, you have to sign something, and if your signature is too far off, they're going to consider that suspicious at best. But just for that, a poll worker can take a good look at you and have you arrested on the spot, which has happened. And as far as mail voting is, it's the same process, but instead of doing that in person, trying to go to different polling locations, what you do is you try to, have multiple ballots with the same forms and names, and you have to try and change the votes. But if election officials find a second mail-in ballot, the result is the same. You're going to, at the very least, get a phone call if someone tries to do that with your name. And that's just how difficult it is to commit voter fraud in the U.S., and that's because the ballot itself is a secret. When you count, you can't trace that to a name at very best. The most information you can get from a voter is who they are, what party they registered as, and whether they voted or not. And the second thing I kind of have a sticking point with, because registering to vote by party is not something Minnesota does. We don't have open primaries either. You can request a primary ballot and fill it out on either side, but you can't do it for both sides. That's how Minnesota does primaries, and primaries are just really a more complicated thing than I can't really say my opinion on that in one sentence. But yeah, voter fraud is real. I think the media should acknowledge it, but its existence doesn't change the outcome of anything. Trying to cast another vote involves knowing multiple names, signing multiple signatures, and hoping no one finds out. And you have to do that under the assumption that the people's names you're using don't actually show up and vote. Very risky thing. So that's voter fraud. Then there's claiming there's enough of it to have won the election that you clearly lost. Yeah, I'm going there. as this video is getting posted, when it is up, and when you see it, there's a good chance that Donald Trump will not have conceded the election to Joe Biden, and he might never do that. But on January 20th, Joe Biden will be president. Or worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, it's Nancy Pelosi. Well, the second worst case scenario to Trump actually stealing it, and I have said in a previous video, there is a 1 in 1,000 chance of that happening, but even so, even if it does, like even in an extremely unlikely scenario where states do not certify their results, Minnesota will certify its result and send its electors, and they will go to Joe Biden. But like if some swing states aren't able to do that and send competing electors, which is not going to happen for Pennsylvania, but say there's enough contested electors, you're going to have a constitutional crisis, and that will instigate a nationwide general strike that up to 80% of Americans will participate in, and no U.S. president has ever had to deal with that, even in the worst situations. Like, Trump will not want to do that. So, yeah, voter fraud. It's an issue, but not a real one. It's a thing that we have solved as a society in this country effectively. And it has never happened after 1890. It has never happened enough times to change the outcome of any election. Like, even if you went to a tiny town and it happened once, everyone would know. If you went to a town of even like 200 people, it can't happen enough times to change anything. You just can't do that. It you know, and it is illegal. It is a felony. So, to have the president decrying voter fraud while also encouraging his supporters to do that, stop. The election is over. It is done. Like, there is a 99.9% chance that all of the states are going to be certified except Georgia, but that's not really going to change anything. And they're going to send the electors, and it will be done. And to withhold intelligence and throw a massive tantrum that I really hope someone is filming. I would pay $1,000 to see that. But just to do that, to just drag your feet until the end, until January 20th, when Joe Biden will be inaugurated, at that point, I mean, at that point, and, already right now, I'm not going to play fake centrist with you anymore. Like, there are conservative and liberal, but between Republicans and Democrats, Republicans just suck right now. And, if you're not willing to take a loss on this election, okay, Republicans, Trump voters, the base, Even those of you who believe in QAnon, just hear me out. If you're not willing to take a loss on this election, you are never going to win another. You will make Wyoming, Idaho, North Dakota, those will be swing states. The rest will be blue. This is my gut talking, and you guys seem to trust that more than statistics. Believe me when I say that. I don't want the US to turn into a dominant party democracy where the Democrats control everything. But if Trump just keeps dragging his feet and throwing a massive tantrum, that's exactly what is going to happen. And even someone like Charlie Baker will not be able to win the presidency as a Republican anymore, just because he holds on to being a Republican. I think the US would be best to have left-wing and right-wing competing against each other. But in order for that to happen, for Pete's sake, Trump, just end it. Find a way to, if you just conceded, that's good enough for most of us now. But, if you have to take some time to do that in a way where you still look like a winner somehow, that's fine. But for anyone that is entertaining the idea of giving Trump some kind of participation trophy just so he can GTFO out of the White House, no, don't. When he leaves, he needs to face the consequences of his actions. He could be in jail. Let that happen. Because Trump is the real fraud, and he always has been. That's the Minnesota perspective on this, and I will see you in the next video.